Newborn was abandoned in a park, but a stray dog refused to let him die. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It's always awesome to see how far our stories are reaching. Sarah Thompson, a young woman with a pale face and distant eyes, wrapped herself in a thin coat, barely enough to shield her from the icy air of the town park. Snow fell gently, dancing among the bare trees. In her arms, she carried a bundle wrapped in a worn grey blanket. It was her newborn son, still carrying the sweet, fragile scent of life. Sarah wept silently. Each step she took was a battle between love and fear. In her mind, the voice of Derek Carter, her partner, echoed like a violent storm. "I don't want that kid in this house, I warned you." She wasn't evil. She was just broken, manipulated, terrified. She had nowhere to go, no family, no friends, only a secret, heavier than her own strength. She reached a wooden bench beneath a flickering street lamp. She looked at the baby one last time. His tiny hands grasped at the air, searching for his mother's warmth. Sarah kissed him with cold, trembling lips. She whispered something only God and the wind could hear. "Forgive me, I have no choice." She placed him on the bench. She stepped back, crying, but didn't look back. Her footsteps faded into the snow, leaving tracks that the dawn would soon cover. Hours later, as the town slept, a scruffy figure emerged from the park's bushes. It was a dog, with dirty fur and paws cracked from the pavement, a stray mutt everyone knew as Buddy. No collar, no owner, with scars on his body and soul. Buddy sniffed the air. Something was wrong. He moved slowly, his paws sinking into the snow. Then he saw it, a tiny being wrapped in a blanket, barely breathing. He approached cautiously. The baby wasn't crying. He was only trembling. Buddy sniffed him, circled him. Then, without hesitation, he lay down beside the child, curling up against him. The warmth of his body began to envelop the baby, as if life refused to give up just yet. The wind howled, but Buddy didn't move. No one came for him. Only a lost soul. That night, in the midst of abandonment, purity answered with loyalty, and a stray dog chose not to let someone who couldn't even cry die. Morning crept slowly over the park. Frost covered every corner like a fragile layer of glass. The tree branches creaked under the first rays of sunlight. A few joggers passed along the main path, earbuds in, lost in their routines, noticing nothing out of the ordinary. Buddy stayed there, still, his body shielding the baby. He hadn't slept, he hadn't eaten. His only purpose was to keep that tiny creature alive. He panted lightly, steam rising from his muzzle like signs of a silent promise. The baby was still breathing, barely, but breathing. In the distance, a woman walked her golden retriever. She paused for a moment when she saw the scruffy shape on the bench, thought it was just another stray dog, frowned, and moved on. She didn't see the baby. She didn't get closer. No one did. Buddy lifted his head briefly. He watched every person passing by, his eyes pleading for help, but he was invisible to them. He always had been. He was just that dirty park dog. Hours passed. The sun rose higher, but the cold didn't let up. Then George appeared, an older man, thin, wearing a wool cap and moving with slow steps. He carried a small bag of dog food kibble. Every morning, he walked to the park to leave something for Buddy. He didn't know his name. He didn't know where he came from. He only knew that this dog never asked for anything, but always thanked him with a look. George saw him from a distance. Something about Buddy's posture alarmed him. He hurried as best he could, out of breath. When he reached the bench, his eyes widened. "Good Lord," he whispered, clutching his chest. The baby was pale, his lips bluish. Buddy covered him like he was his own pup. George didn't hesitate. He pulled out his cell phone and dialed 911 with trembling hands. "There's a baby, abandoned, in the town park. He's alive, but barely. A dog. A dog's taking care of him. Please, send an ambulance." While waiting, he took off his thick coat and wrapped it around the baby. Buddy stepped back, but only enough to let George act. He didn't growl. He didn't bark. He understood. He trusted. When the paramedics arrived, the scene brought tears to their eyes. "This dog found him?" a young paramedic asked, gently lifting the baby. "No. This dog, he saved him," George replied, his voice breaking. Buddy stayed behind, watching them take his little charge away. He didn't follow. He didn't make a sound. He just lowered his head. But something in his eyes changed. For the first time in a long while, someone had seen him. The small hospital in Greenwood County wasn't used to emergencies like this. When the ambulance arrived, doctors and nurses were ready, arms open, faces tense. The baby was rushed straight to the neonatal intensive care unit. He had severe hypothermia, signs of malnutrition, and slight breathing problems. But he was alive. Against all odds, he was breathing. Nurse Emma Wilson, with a kind face and her hair tied back, was the first to hold him gently in the hospital. She wrapped him in thermal blankets and whispered softly, as if speaking to a fragile soul just arrived in the world. "You're safe now, little one. You're not alone." Meanwhile, George waited in the lobby, holding a cup of coffee he'd forgotten about. Sheriff James Bennett, a tall man in his 50s with a stern face, approached him. "So, you're saying the dog was on top of the baby?" "Not on top, protecting him, like he knew what he was doing, like he was sent for it," George replied, his eyes misty. "And the mother?" "No one was there, just footprints disappearing into the snow." James nodded, serious. He was a man of facts, not faith, but something about this story unsettled him. He sent an officer to check nearby cameras, though that part of the park had little surveillance, too far from the main streets, too easy to vanish. Outside in the parking lot, Buddy lingered. He'd tucked himself under a metal awning near the trash bins. He didn't want to go inside. He didn't understand that place of lights and noise. He only knew the baby was there. Emma saw him from a hallway window and went down carefully. She knelt at a safe distance. "Are you the one who saved him?" she asked softly. Buddy didn't move a muscle. He just looked at her. His eyes were tired but alert, wary but not aggressive. Emma left a bowl of water and a small plate of cafeteria leftovers. She stepped back, giving him space. After a moment, Buddy approached and ate. Not greedily, but with a kind of calm sadness. He didn't expect love, just survival. Inside the hospital, the baby was slowly responding. His temperature was starting to stabilize. Emma named him Liam temporarily because she said he was rescued from a flood of abandonment. "Liam means rest, protection, hope," she murmured, stroking the tiny hand now clutching her finger. Outside, the snow kept falling, quiet, steady, as if the sky still had something to say. The news spread quickly to local media. "Baby abandoned in park saved by stray dog," read the headline on WKLN's morning bulletin. But while some were touched behind their screens, others chose to look away. Buddy kept lingering around the hospital. Despite his scruffy look and limping walk, no one dared get too close. A security guard, a young man named Tyler, tried to shoo him away with a sharp yell and a loud clap. "Get out of here! This isn't a place for stray mutts!" Buddy backed off with a low, soft growl but didn't snap. He shuffled to a corner behind the recycling bins and lay down, his muzzle on his front paws, like an exiled guardian. From a second-floor window, Liam slept. Small, fragile, hooked up to wires and monitors tracking his recovery. Emma watched him from a chair by the incubator. She felt more than tenderness. She felt anger. How could someone abandon a baby like that? She said to her colleague, Nathan, a young nurse with thick glasses. "Broken people, scared people. Sometimes just cruel," he replied, sadness in his eyes. Meanwhile, Sheriff James reviewed footage with his deputy from a camera 2 blocks from the park. They finally caught a glimpse of a young woman carrying what looked like a bundle wrapped in blankets. The time matched. Her face was barely visible, but enough to start an investigation. "Find that woman," James ordered, his voice firm. "Not to punish her, yet. I want to know who forced her." As evening fell, George returned to the hospital with an old blanket in his hands. He spread it out near the corner where Buddy still rested and sat beside him. "I don't know if anyone ever gave you a name, but to me, you're braver than most men I know." Buddy looked at him, not with excitement, but with that patient expression only those who've learned to wait without being wanted have. George extended his hand. This time, Buddy didn't pull back. He accepted the gesture, resting his tired head on the old man's knees, and for the first time he closed his eyes in peace. Inside the hospital, Liam woke. Just for a second, just a blink, but Emma noticed. "Hey, little one, you're not alone. Not anymore." And out in the world, most people passed by without seeing, without stopping. But 2 humble souls were enough for the miracle to begin. The next morning came with pale light and heavy air. Low clouds hung over the sky, as if sensing something deep was brewing in the town. In the hospital, Liam had been moved from intensive care to a special room, still fragile but with stable signs. Emma stayed by his side like he was her own blood. In the lobby, George held a cup of tea a nurse had offered him. His face was tired, but there was a calm peace in it, like someone who'd finally found a purpose after years of silence. Emma sat beside him. "Yesterday, I saw how that dog looked at you." "He's not just any dog," George nodded slowly. "I know, I've seen him wander these streets for years. No one wanted him around, but he never hurt anyone. And now, he saved a life. Maybe it was God, or maybe just a heart too noble to ignore a cry. Does he have a name? Not that I know, but he's always seemed like Buddy. Strong but quiet, like he carries scars you can't see." Emma smiled softly, then sighed. "Liam needs more than medicine. He needs human warmth, a bond. And that dog, he's part of it." Just then, the sound of claws on the linoleum floor caught their attention. Buddy had slipped through the automatic doors, drawn by a scent or something deeper. He didn't run, didn't bark. He just walked slowly, purposefully, to the hallway where Liam was. A guard tried to stop him, but Emma held him back firmly. "Let him be. That dog has more right to be here than most of us." Buddy stopped at the room's door, as if he knew exactly where to go. Emma opened it carefully and let him in. Inside, the silence was sacred. Buddy approached the clear crib and sat. He didn't do anything. He just looked. And then, like an invisible sigh, Liam turned his head slightly toward him. It was George who murmured, "He didn't come for food. He came to make sure the little one was okay. That's what gentle souls do. They don't ask for anything. They just stay." A nurse snapped a photo with her phone. Not out of curiosity, but respect. It was a moment that wouldn't happen again. The abandoned dog, the rescued child, and a bond no human could explain. That day, Emma made a quiet decision. If no one claimed Liam, she would. And if no one claimed Buddy, she would too. 3 days had passed since that dawn that changed 3 lives forever. The hospital was settling back into its routine, but Liam's room remained a place where time seemed to pause. Emma slept on a fold-out cot by his crib, and Buddy stayed at the foot of the bed, watchful. No one made him leave. No one dared. Across town, Sheriff James's investigation moved forward steadily. The blurry camera footage had been cleaned up, and they finally identified a face. Sarah Thompson, 20 years old, no record. She'd dropped out of high school months ago and lived with a man 10 years older in a rough neighborhood on the north side. James and his deputy, Officer Rachel Davis, went to the address. It was a grey house with a peeling facade, a porch littered with cigarette butts and empty jugs. Derek Carter, a burly man with a harsh face and gruff voice, met them with hostility the moment they knocked. "What do you want? There's no baby here," he said, arms crossed. James didn't answer right away. He studied him calmly, with a look that saw more than it asked. "We're looking into an abandonment. We think the mother was under pressure, maybe even threatened." Derek let out a short, dry laugh. "Pressure? Please. That girl doesn't have the brains to raise a cat." Rachel cut in firmly. "Is Sarah here?" Derek hesitated. It was just a shift in his stance, but it was enough. "She doesn't have to talk to you, not without a lawyer." James nodded slowly. "We're not here for culprits, Mr. Carter. We're here to protect a victim." In the back of the house, behind a tattered curtain, a figure watched. Sarah. Her face was drawn, her eyes red. She'd heard everything, and inside, something broke. That night, while Derek slept heavily after several beers, Sarah slipped out. She walked barefoot down the icy street, arms crossed over her chest. Each step was a silent confession. She reached the hospital at dawn, pale as a ghost. Emma saw her from a distance and knew, before a word was spoken, who she was. "Are you the mother?" Emma asked softly. Sarah nodded. She wasn't crying. She was beyond tears. "I don't want to take him back. I just needed to know he was alive." Emma stepped closer and took her hand, firm but without judgment. "He's alive, thanks to a stray dog. And to you, because you chose the cold over total oblivion." Sarah looked down. For the first time in days, she breathed without fear. "Can I see him?" Emma hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Sarah entered the room where Liam slept, his face calm. Buddy lifted his head at her presence. He didn't growl. He just watched. She approached with timid steps. She didn't touch the baby. She only looked. "I'm sorry," she whispered, as if those two words could cleanse a lifetime of guilt. Buddy watched her silently, and as if he understood the truth in her regret, he closed his eyes and rested again. The day broke through the clouds with a calm clarity, as if the sky finally let some light fall on the earth's wounds. In the hospital, Sarah sat on a bench in the back garden, hugging herself, staring at nothing. Her face showed traces of a storm that hadn't stopped in days, but her eyes, though tired, no longer ran. Sheriff James approached with quiet steps. He held an envelope of papers he didn't seem eager to hand over. He sat beside her, keeping his distance, and for a moment they shared a silence that didn't weigh heavy. "I'm not here to arrest you," he said at last, "though the law could." Sarah didn't answer. She kept her gaze on the horizon. "But there's something called context, and sometimes that matters more than legal codes." She turned her face slowly toward him, surprised by the gentleness in his tone. "I didn't want to," she began, but her voice broke. "Derek said if I didn't do it, he would—" "His way." James nodded as if he'd already known. He opened the envelope and pulled out a sheet. "We have a warrant for Derek Carter. Your statement is enough, but what he did to you and your son, that has consequences too." Sarah closed her eyes and a single tear slid down her cheek. "Can I start over, even if I don't raise him?" Not all fresh starts need to be perfect. They just need to be real. Inside the hospital, Emma watched the scene from a window. Buddy, as always, was at her feet, calm. Liam slept deeply, now free of wires and monitors, wrapped only in soft blankets and the warmth of the room. At the police station that afternoon, Derek was arrested without a fight. His expression wasn't anger or remorse, but exhaustion, as if he'd never believed anything or anyone could challenge his control. "Was it really that damn dog?" he asked as they cuffed him. James didn't answer. He just looked at him with a mix of disdain and pity, like you'd look at someone already defeated inside. "It was someone with more soul than you," he said, as they loaded him into the patrol car. Back at the hospital, Sarah approached Liam's room one last time before leaving. Emma walked with her. "Are you sure you don't want to leave your info for the adoption system?" Emma asked gently. Sarah shook her head but smiled with warmth. "He's already found his family. And I need to find myself." Emma nodded. She didn't push. Sarah leaned toward Liam, kissed his forehead softly and whispered, "Thanks for giving me a reason to escape." Then she briefly stroked Buddy's head. He looked at her without judgment, as if he knew that sometimes letting go is also love. Winter was starting to fade, and with it, the grey days gave way to shy green sprouts peeking out in gardens and bare branches. In a small wooden house on the outskirts of Springfield, life took shape with an almost invisible gentleness. It was George's house. The old man who used to walk quietly with a bag of dog food kibble under his arm now held something far more fragile, a bottle. Liam, wrapped in a light blue blanket knitted by a neighbor, drank eagerly, while Buddy watched from the rug by the fireplace, ears relaxed, body at ease. Emma, sitting in a wicker chair, looked at them with a mix of tenderness and responsibility. She'd completed all the legal paperwork to grant George temporary custody of Liam after careful evaluation. "I never imagined my days ending like this," George said, smiling without taking his eyes off the baby. "But maybe this is exactly how they were meant to end." Emma smiled back. "Or begin." The place smelled of fresh-baked bread, strong coffee, and something more. Home. That mix of simple things that cost nothing but mean everything. Buddy got up and approached the makeshift crib where Liam now slept. He nudged it gently with his nose, as if checking he was still breathing. Then he lay down beside it, just as he had that night in the park, but now without fear, without abandonment, without cold. The whole community had started to hear the story. What began as a news report was now part of the town's shared memory. Some neighbors dropped by with diapers, blankets, or just kind words. No one dared touch Buddy without permission. They all respected him. They knew what he'd done. He was more than a dog. He was a symbol. One day, Emma arrived with a small leather collar in a simple box. She handed it to George with a warm smile. "It's time Buddy had something to show who he is. He's not a stray anymore." George held it in his hands, then knelt in front of his companion. "What do you say, old friend? Ready to officially join this family?" Buddy didn't answer. He didn't need to. He leaned forward and rested his head on George's chest. In that silent gesture, an eternal pact was sealed. That night, as the wind gently moved the curtains and the fireplace crackled with its cozy warmth, Liam slept soundly. protected by two guardians, one of flesh and bone, and one with a furry soul and a boundless heart. For the first time, no one feared what tomorrow would bring. Spring settled in fully. The days grew longer, birds returned to their nests, and wildflowers lined the roadsides with warm, carefree colors. The world seemed to have forgotten the cold, but in a small wooden house on Elmwood Lane, no one forgot what they'd been through. Liam was almost 3 months old. His rosy cheeks, bright eyes, and restless hands spoke of a childhood starting to bloom. George, with his slow but steady steps, had built a routine around him. Every morning he took him out in a stroller to the porch. Buddy followed, always watchful, standing by the steps like a sentinel without a uniform. Emma was still there, though she didn't live with them. She visited at least 3 times a week, not out of duty but because her soul was tied to this little family. She brought books, formula, and sometimes just her quiet presence. She said Liam was her reminder that life, even when wounded, could be rebuilt. One afternoon, as the sun filtered through the oak tree in the yard, a group of neighborhood kids approached. One of them, Mason, a blonde 8-year-old, came up to Buddy cautiously, eyes fixed on the dog. "Is he the dog that saved the baby?" he asked, not looking away. George nodded from his rocking chair. "Yep, his name's Buddy." Mason knelt slowly. Buddy didn't move. Then, almost in a whisper, the boy said, "My dad says dogs don't have souls, but I think this one does." George looked at him with a deep smile. "Your dad's wrong about a lot of things, kid." The moment was interrupted by a pickup truck pulling up in front of the house. Sheriff James stepped out, dressed in civilian clothes. He carried a folder and a small package. "Didn't want to come as a cop today," he said, handing the package to George, "just as someone who needed to see this place for myself." The package held a plaque from the town council, "To Buddy for his bravery, loyalty, and service to life." Inside was a simple medal shaped like a paw print. George held it in his fingers with respect. "He doesn't need this, but I do." Emma, who'd just arrived with an apple pie in her hands, overheard and approached with a smile. Not all heroes wear capes. Some just need a leash. And love. Later that night, when the house was quiet and the world seemed calm, Buddy went out to the yard. He sat under the stars and looked up at the sky. He wasn't searching for anything, he was just gazing, and for a fleeting moment a comet streaked across the heavens. No one else saw it, but Buddy understood. Sometimes miracles don't make a sound, they just happen. Summer arrived slowly. The windows of George's house opened in the mornings, letting in the soft breeze and the scent of the garden. Liam, now stronger, laughed with high-pitched sounds that filled every corner like rediscovered ancient music. His laughter was different, not just a baby's laugh. It was the laugh of someone who'd come back from a very dark place and chose to stay. Emma lifted him in her arms with ease, as if he'd always been hers. She hadn't adopted him officially, not yet, but her heart had made that choice long ago. The bond between the three grew stronger with everyday moments. Bottles warmed with care, afternoons under the trees, smiles shared without rush. Buddy remained loyal. His fur, once dull, now shone in the sun. His step was firmer, his presence steady. He didn't make noise, he didn't demand attention, but he was always there. When Liam slept, he stayed by the crib. Tell me in the comments, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this story so far? Your opinion means a lot to me. When Liam cried, Buddy barked once, never more, as if saying, "Someone, come. He needs you." On the first anniversary of the rescue, George organized a small picnic in the park, the same park where it all began. They brought a blanket, a basket of fruit, and Liam's old stroller. Buddy walked beside them with a calm step, recognizing the ground. They stopped at the same bench. Emma approached and in silence placed a white rose on the wood. "This is where it all started," she said softly, "and where something inside me woke up." George stroked Buddy's back. "That day God sent an angel, just not with wings. It came with scars and dirty paws." An elderly couple passing by stopped, recognizing the scene. "Is that him? The dog that saved the baby?" the woman asked, touched. Emma nodded. Buddy, unaware he was the center of so many stories, lay down in the shade of a tree, tongue out, heart at peace. Before leaving, George took a photo. Emma holding Liam in her arms, Buddy at her feet, the sun filtering through the leaves. A simple image, but full of everything that matters. Back home as night fell, Emma sat at the computer. An adoption form was open on the screen, permanent adoption application. She typed her name, Liam's, and, as the second household member, Buddy's. "We're a family," she whispered, and as the cursor blinked on the screen, Buddy, lying by the door, lifted his head for a moment. Just one. Then he went back to sleep, calm, complete. Because true love isn't bought, it's found. Years passed. The seasons rolled on, and the wooden house on Elmwood Lane became a quiet refuge for anyone who stopped by. It wasn't fancy. It didn't have tall fences or alarms, but it had something few homes in the world managed to keep: peace. Liam grew up surrounded by love. They never hid his story from him. From a young age, he knew his arrival in the world was marked by abandonment, yes, but also by a desperate act of love, and a dog who refused to let him die. George lived long enough to see Liam take his first steps, say his first words, and one day run through the yard calling for Buddy like he was his big brother. When he finally passed, he did so in peace, in his favorite armchair, with sunlight streaming through the window, and Emma's voice reading softly in the background. Buddy, as always, stayed by his side until his last breath. Emma, over time, formalized the adoption. She raised Liam as if he'd come from her own womb. She taught him that compassion matters more than judgment, and that the bonds that save don't need to be blood. They need to be true. Sarah, the birth mother, walked a path of rebuilding. With counseling and community support, she went back to school, and years later sent Emma a handwritten letter. She asked for nothing. She only gave thanks. It read, "Thank you for giving my son the life I couldn't. I carry him in my soul, though not in my arms." And Buddy aged with dignity. His steps slowed. His hearing faded little by little, but his presence remained the heart of the home. When his final day came, Liam, now 7 years old, stayed by his side the whole time. He held his paw and whispered, "You were my first hero. Thanks for staying." Buddy passed without pain, like those who know they've fulfilled their purpose. Today, in the same park where it all began, there's a bronze plaque by a restored wooden bench. It reads, "To Buddy, for his silent loyalty, for his pure instinct, for saving a life without asking for anything in return." And just below, "Though the world abandons you, a noble soul can find you." The story of Buddy, Liam, Emma, and George didn't become world famous. It wasn't an international headline, but it was told, retold, and wept over by everyone who heard it. Because some stories don't need fame. They just need to be true. And this one was. Thank you so much for sticking with this story until the end. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a ton and motivates us to keep bringing new stories every week. And since you're here, take a moment to check out another one of our stories that's popping up on your screen. Big hug and see you next time. Stay well.